Right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar titled Automating IT Business Process and Security Controls to Improve Compliance and Reduce Risk. KPMG and NextLabs have created a great presentation for you, so thank you for joining us. Today, our experts will discuss advanced methods of automating business process controls. Key topics we're going to talk about today include policy-driven dynamic authorization and access control management, effective and easy ways of implementing audit requirements such as segregation of duties, and reimagining security and access management and dynamic roles. Before we begin, here are a few housekeeping notes. If you have questions during the presentation, there is a Q&A function available at the bottom of the screen. We'll try to answer your questions during the presentation, but if we are unable to respond, you will get a follow-up answer afterwards. This webinar is also being recorded, and a link to the recording will be available following the webinar. All right. My name is Steve Brown, and I'll be acting as the MC for today's presentation. I'm a solution architect with NextLabs, primarily working with authorization and access control in the government and regulated industries.
Hey, Steve. So this is Engel Schmidt. I'll be helping out. I'm with KPMG. I've got probably 20 plus years in the SAP security and control space. I focus on SAP GRC security and controls with our clients at KPMG, and I'll be participating today too. Jonathan?
Good morning, everyone. So yeah, my name is Jonathan Levitt. So I'm also with KPMG in the security controls practice with over 15 years experience in this area. So yeah, looking forward to presenting today. So Krishna.
Hello everyone, my name is Krishna. I'm from NextLabs. I'm a solution architect working on SAP related products. I have 15 plus years of experience in SAP, focusing on security and authorization management. I'll be presenting the use cases later in the session today.
We have a lot to cover today, and I appreciate everybody joining. I know everybody's busy with a lot of things going on before the holidays, and would just like to kick this off. Like I said, I have over 20 years experience in this space, and I've seen a lot of things change in the SAP world, since that's probably one of the bigger ERPs that's out there. But I think a lot is changing across other applications too. And if you look at all the technology that's coming on board and the disruption in the IT space that a lot of companies are faced with today, there's just a lot of change, right? And so because of that change, your controls environment is going to need to change and address your standard security and controls from a different perspective. I mean, if right here we're showing a bunch of different things, but data has grown and grown in environments. Companies, as they're going to these new ERPs, whether they're in the cloud or on-prem, the systems are just creating a whole lot more data, and we're having to learn how to secure that. Cyber is getting more and more important on being able to secure your information, not only from within the application, which we've been focused on for years, but cyber and that layer between the network and the application is getting larger. Because of that, we've seen a lot more fraud. There's a couple of websites out there that you can go to, but you can see the breaches have been increasing at companies over the last couple of years because of all the access to data, and I think all the systems are changing. Right, we're no longer in an environment where it's one ERP. I think we've kind of been coining as best of breed over the last couple of years. So we're starting to see, SAP made a bunch of big acquisitions over the years, and so now their system is made up of a lot of different applications that have different security structures. Excuse me. But they're also starting to use more integrated AI and machine learning in their applications as they go with their new S4 transformations. And so that's changing your security environment also. What do people need access to? Can we go to the next slide, please? So, and that's where things are starting to change, and evolve in your risk management because of these disruptions in a sense, and all these new technologies coming in place. Because I think I feel when we talk to a lot of clients that they're still basing their control environment on when they first hit the Sarbanes-Oxley world, and they've continued to evolve it, but now technology is kind of leapfrogged ahead of them, and now it's taking a much different approach, and they're having to revisit that, and how are they going to address things? Because, like I said, just alone the security structures and all the different applications, and how do you get to handle that? So we've got a lot of third-party integration in the systems. We've got a lot of transformation integrity as people go through these changes. Where data integrity is huge, and the the systems are giving us the capability to do continuous monitoring, both in the cloud and on-prem. So with the advancement and the challenge, we also have new opportunities to improve our world and make it a lot easier. Can we move on to the next slide? But I'm going to go back to kind of the basics, right? We've always had to warn ourselves against, here we have the bad actor and security risk, right? It still comes down to a one-on-one, and, we've got to secure our applications, which ones are critical to the systems, which ones are open to breaches that could cause financial disruption. Data is huge, as I was talking about. It continues to grow, and access to the data, because more and more the systems are relying on that data for, like I said, AI. A lot of transactions that were executed by individuals are now being automated, and machine learning is based on that too. So when you go into these predictive models over next steps, and finance is becoming more a strategist rather than a doer in the system, they're basing um, their all their implementations or their concepts on what's coming out of the system, right? So those decisions are being made based on all this AI. If they get compromised, they could change their strategy, which could cause financial problems for the company, right? So we still have to know from our people who has access to what, right? And how do we manage that? And sometimes the applications today, with the security that's available within the applications, is really hard to manage, because, like I said, it's a much more dynamic world. Move on to the next one. And on top of that, we have regulations. Okay, here we have a couple of lists of regulations across the world that have come on and being stronger, and kind of taking more of a front view of that, since people are having to address, especially the global companies that are having to address. I've worked with different companies that are not only US based, but they're global, right? And so they have to make sure that they're addressing all these regulations across. So, what's good for security in the US may not be the same for what's in Germany or Brazil, for say. You may have to have different policies and address that security model differently in different countries. And so that plays an effect too. Next one. And so just to wrap up my part here, KPMG did a study end of 2019, which plays pretty heavily today, as we've gone through this environment that we've been working through for the last year or so. In order to disrupt a lot of, like I said, the artificial intelligence is taking on, and they process a lot of big data on their own. So how do you secure big data, considering that the system itself is going at it, and how do you secure that AI, right? Who has access to change the AI or affect it? Financial professionals are becoming more strategic rather than doers, because the system can do a lot for them. And I like the one where it's a money ball strategy, right? So between finance and analytics, because the systems are that much more capable today for what folks are going to be implementing now and going forward. So, and back to the best of breed applications, there's a lot of dynamics. The systems today and the ERPs that companies are looking to implement, they're on-prem. You've got them on-prem. You've got cloud applications. You've got this mixture of both. How do I manage that? And so it's taking a different layer of security and risk management to cover that, right? And so from a security and controls perspective, the business requirements are huge. What sort of benchmarking you use, what's identification of those drivers. You have to have the right security and control strategies, and define the attributes and the profiles and the performance, and how are you going to measure that with KPIs. But it gets into the control services and the knowledge management. How are you going to release this and push this out to your organization? and the control mechanisms, and then also the technologies. There's new technologies that can come into play, and that's what we're talking to today, and a little bit change. How do you layer on additional security to make sure that all these technologies are covered, right, from the data and the applications? So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Jonathan, who's going to talk a little bit more about how do we manage risk in the new environments and some ideas going forward. Jonathan?
Thanks, Engel. Yeah, so moving on to the next slide. Perfect, thank you. Okay, so now we just walked through the breadth of the risk landscape. I feel that it's a nice transition into this section and this slide, aptly called Understanding Your Risk Landscape. And the purpose of really the next few slides is to highlight how risk should be driving your security approach. So organizations face a variety of risks, and the risks vary from organization to organization. So to start building out your approach to security, an organization needs to identify, evaluate, and prioritize those risks facing them from both internal and external sources, whether CCPA for data privacy or SOX for financial reporting. Then once those have been identified from a process, technology, and system perspective, determine where the vulnerabilities which expose each risk lie. So now you kind of get into the access governance strategy, and this is a framework that allows an organization to make intelligent decisions about who is allowed to access which information assets, when and in what context. And this is a living document that adopts transparency and should be driven by risk. And then to the far right of the screen, the governance strategy then drives the actions or the operating model to minimize, monitor, and control the probability or impact of risk coming to fruition. So it's in essence the tactical approach to security covering people, processes, etc. So yeah, on to the next slide. Okay, thank you. Yeah, so from a governance strategy and the understanding of the IT risk landscape, you can then identify the requirements needed for a strong SAP security operations program. So, you know, we typically separate these requirements into preventative, detective, and reactionary measures or categories. So under prevent, you have your access controls, and this, simply put, is access granted to users. So ensuring that access is that is provisioned is appropriate, and that the access corresponds with an end user's day-to-day responsibilities. And then there is data protection, whereby restrictions are put in place to protect data considered sensitive to the organization. And this is typically deemed more granular type of access control and is specific to a field within the system. Then under detect, there is smart monitoring. This is targeted monitoring of security risks to identify potential violations and understand their impact both operationally and from a regulatory compliance perspective. And finally, we have the react, which is the remediation. So the change to security to minimize the risk, or, you know, saying that mitigation, which is the integration of controls to cover that residual risk introduced by granting access to users. So basically the react is the process to limit risk exposure. Okay, so on to the next slide. And converting this approach into a security architecture or model, I mean, that is what is reflected in this slide. So under the prevent, you have your attribute-based access control, and also your typical role-based access control, so ABAC and RBAC. And what we see is a kind of combination of both these approaches, RBAC plus ABAC. It can be an effective access control method for administrators, as it allows the SAP security architecture to align with business requirements. And this is going to be looked at in further depth, you know, during this presentation. But kind of just to give you an overview, you have ABAC security, and this really secures the what, when, where, and how of sensitive functionality based on attributes, subject attributes, environment attributes, or resource attributes. So this can be, for example, subject attributes being a user, a computer, or application-specific data. And then you have your RBAC, which is your baseline security architecture. And this secures the who has access. And this can be simplified significantly by introducing this concept, separated into 3 architectures, one being the general role, which contains everything that's shared and common to a broad array of users. And then you have your reporting and combination. So this is a combination of display type access. And then finally, you have your functional or task-based roles, which represent a granular group of abilities that perform similar maintenance action or function. So, and then on the left of the screen, you have your detect. And this is the ability to identify violations and exposure to risk. And here it is really tuned analytics to monitor segregation of duties, policy access and usage, access to sensitive data or critical functionality. And we see here the introduction of continuous monitoring, which generates basically exception-based alerts. So it's a bit more of a streamlined approach that notify management of potential access risks. And then finally, the react, whereby should a user have a violation, should this access be removed? If not, is a mitigating control required to cover the risk of somebody having this access? And if needed, should this user be provisioned elevated access? The React component is really critical because, not only for reporting to management, but also understanding continuously how security is being utilized within the organization and identifying opportunities for refinement and improvement. So yeah, then moving on to my final slide, which is the benefits. Okay, so what are the benefits? And I'll just walk through them. Attribute-based access control provides more in-depth dynamic risk mitigation. It enables organizations to handle the most complex of access requests and minimizes the need for customization and more roles. So the role architecture, this is typically smaller. So this is your RBAC component and is a lot less complex, meaning a reduction in role design maintenance, streamlined identification of access, and a more sustainable and scalable design with less operational effort associated. The enhanced monitoring, this means more meaningful and less redundant information is provided, enabling better decision-making, and really provides the ability on a near real-time basis to identify violations and eliminate risk. And it also enables more in-depth insight into the impact any violations have. For example, although this person had the access, did they do anything with this access? And then finally, it streamlines compliance and control operation. It potentially reduces access and segregation duties, audit issues, and there's a reduced effort associated with mitigation and limits the need to have elevated access. So yeah, with that being said, I will hand back over to Steve.
Thank you, Jonathan and Ingle. Next slide. Hi. Now that KPMG has described the challenges facing the organizations, NextLabs is now going to present a series of use cases to illustrate them. The use cases are going to be using scenarios based on a manufacturing company that, while it's headquartered in North America, it has a global procurement function. And the director of procurement has decided he wants to transform the procurement function to improve efficiencies while ensuring compliance with applicable laws and regulations. Some of his key challenges include needing to implement fine-grained access controls, achieving the agility needed to improve efficiencies, and a lack of central system to define and manage process controls. Now, Krishna with NextLabs will now present the use cases.
All right. Now that we have seen the business scenario, let's break it down the P2P, procurement to pay lifecycle, and see where there is a need for business controls in lifecycle. As you can see here, there are distinct steps in the P2P lifecycle. starting from internal need and identifying a vendor, evaluating the vendor, and negotiating contract with them, finalizing a one vendor after the evaluation. And then once you have the vendor finalized, you internally raise a purchase rack and then convert that into a PO, or sometimes you can raise a PO directly. And then once you have a PO, you send it to the vendor, and vendor will send the goods whenever they're ready, and you would receive the goods on your side, what we call a GR, goods received. You do some inspection on the goods to make sure it is as per your PO in terms of price and quantity, and also the quality aspects, just to make sure the goods are as per the quality. Once you have the GR received, then it's time to do the invoice payment to the vendor. You run your payment run, pick up the bank account numbers and details for the vendor, and then you send the payment to the vendor. And also you end of the day, you also record your transactions in the form of an accounting document in the finance in your financial system. So in this particular life cycle, there are multiple places where there is a need to have controls. For example, I identified a few places here. One is evaluation of the vendor, negotiating a contract, releasing a PO, and at the time of receiving the GR, doing the GR, and maintaining records within your system. So to demonstrate these controls, let's look at the specific use cases we're going to see today. So we'll have vendor evaluation process set up in ServiceNow, and then we will see who can access those vendor evaluation incidents. So there is a need to control who is authorized versus who is not authorized, because vendor data could have some sensitive information like contact numbers, email addresses, and also some financial information. And also when you create a PO in SAP, usually you have controls around approval matrix, or what we call signature authority, to an extent that to decide whether a user is allowed to create such a big amount of PO or not. So we'll demonstrate a use case using band levels and approval limits to control what amount of PO user can create. And then we'll see a GR process, goods receipt, and we'll demonstrate one of the key aspects in the compliance, that is segregation of duty. Basically, SOD basically tells that in a business process, the same person cannot perform more than one key steps. Like for example, if you are the person who's creating a PO, you should not be the same person receiving the GR or the confirming the GR receipt. Or if you are the person creating a vendor, you should not be the person releasing the payment to the vendor. So like this, we have multiple scenarios where you need to have the duties segregated. So we will demonstrate that aspect in one of the use case using GR. And in the last, we'll look at how we can control sensitive data about the vendor. So as we mentioned, vendor could have bank and account information stored in SAP. So we will look at how we can protect that type of data using dynamic data masking. Let's look at one of the use case where we wanted to implement a control around the business process. In this scenario, we'll be looking at vendor evaluation process. As we had seen earlier in the procurement to pay cycle, vendor evaluation is one of the key steps. We're assuming a scenario where vendor evaluation is done via a ServiceNow incident management system. So the scenario is like this. So the procurement team raises an incident to IT team, IT department, via ServiceNow incident to do the vendor evaluation. This probably usually happens when you do a software procurement or a hardware procurement, where you qualify and evaluate vendors before you finalize on one vendor. So in this particular scenario, there are vendor evaluation requests created in the ServiceNow, and then that incident contains information about the vendor, including their contact information and some financial information. The control around here is that only authorized people are allowed to see the vendor information, owing to GDPR and other compliance requirements. And unauthorized people, they should not be able to access these details. To demonstrate this, I took an example in ServiceNow. So where there are multiple incidents created for a vendor evaluation, and then there is an attribute called project on the incident that defines what is the purpose of the particular evaluation. Is it for a project 1 or a project 2? Similarly, users are also assigned with a project attribute. So when users try to open the incident or try to look at the list of incidents, they should only be seeing incidents where their project attribute is matching. So basically, only when users assigned project is matching with the resource, which is the incident here, the assigned project, only those incidents will be visible to them. If a user is not part of a specific project, then he will not be able to look at those vendor incident and the data. So here I took three different users: demo user 1, user 4, and user 6. So demo user 1 is part of project 1. He's working on one of the software evaluation, and user 4 is part of project 2. And I took a user 6 who do not have any project assigned, so the project assignment is blank. And there are multiple incidents created in the system. There is a incident ending 596, which is for project 1, and 600 is for project 2. So basically, demo user 1 can see 596, which is belongs to project 1, and he cannot see, for example, 600, which is for a project 2. Similarly, demo user 4, who is part of project 2, he cannot see the incident belonging to project 1. And also, if you have any user who do not have any project assigned, for example, demo user 6 here, he will not be able to see either project 1 or project 2. So let's take a look how this works in the system. To demonstrate this, I already logged into ServiceNow here as an administrator, and I'm showing the list of incidents that are in the system here. So as you can see, there are at least 4 different incidents related to vendor evaluation. So there is one for software for FP&A team, and there is one project for hardware evaluation for a new project. And then you can see that there is an attribute called project. So 596 and 599, they belong to project 1. 600 and 601, they belong to project 2. So this is the system admin view who has there is no restriction. He can see all the data. That's why he's able to see here. Now let's try to log in with demo user 1 and see what data he can access. So I already logged in here as demo user 1. So let's go into the incident list here. So here let's look at all the incidents instead of any condition on the list of incidents. So when you look at all the incidents, even though there are lot of incidents in the system, he's only seeing only 3 of them. One is 596 and 599, because both of these belonging to project 1, and he's assigned to project 1. That's why he's able to see it. At the same time, he's not able to see the project 2. So that's why you have an access control where you can restrict what a user can see, and also even if you go inside, you have specific sensitive information about the vendor. For example, here we have a vendor evaluation form which contains some specific data about the vendor, including financials and some contact information, so which is very sensitive. So in this way, so this is a one sample Excel file that is attached to the vendor evaluation. So this is containing some sensitive information corresponding to this particular evaluation. So this information is this access to the incident is secured via the policy that is written using the project attribute. Let's try to look at demo user 4. I already logged into demo user 4, who belongs to project 2. So basically, let's and you can check from the incident. go back and see all the incidents that you can see. Yeah, you can see here he is not able to see the 596 and 599, the incident that were belonging to project 1, but he's only seeing 2 incidents, 600 and 601. Now you can see that the project has project 2. So let's also look at a user who do not have any project attributes assigned to him. Let me quickly log out and log in here with demo user 6. And then if a user do not have any membership into a project, then he should not be able to see any incidents at all. So let's look at it, what happens, and see. Yeah, let's look at all the incidents without any condition. So here, he cannot see any incidents at all. There's no data to be, and the number of rows removed from this list by security constraints. So this is actually coming from the security policy that we have implemented. So that with that, those incidents got filtered when this user is trying to display the list of incidents. So in this way, the fine-grained access control can be implemented using NextLab policies, using attribute-based access control. Basically using the attributes from user and attributes from the resource, you can define a policy, and that policy can be used to enforce these restrictions at the application level. In this example, we will see how we can implement control in a purchasing process. So in SAP purchasing, we have a function of creating a purchase order. There are multiple ways to create a purchase order. You could start from a purchase rec and then convert to a PO, or you could create a PO directly using ME21N transaction. One of the common control companies would like to have would be to restrict the amount of the total PO value that users can create, so that only authorized people can create POs with bigger value, and also just to make sure that nobody is consuming the total budget they have there. So to demonstrate this particular control, we have simulated a scenario here using band levels. So users have different band levels assigned to them. So some users have band level B1, B2, B3. So B1 band level basically means that they are allowed to create a PO up to $10,000, up to $1,000 USD. Similarly, B2 users can create up to $10,000 USD, including 10,000. So if they create anything more than 10,000, a user belonging to band level B2, if he creates a PO more than total value more than $10,000, then system should stop him from creating the PO to begin with. To demonstrate this, I've laid out the scenario here. So there are two users here, demo user 10 and 11. User 10 has a band level of B1 and user 11 has a band level of B2. So B1 can create up to $1,000 and B2 can create up to $10,000. So we will look at multiple scenarios and see how system will behave it, and we can also and how these things can be done with the NextLab policies. Let's take a quick look into the system. I already logged into demo user 10. So let's try to create a PO with a value. Let's create a PO with value more than 1,000, and then we'll go and create something that he can do it. I'm going to create a new PO here. So I'm going to take quantity 12, and then I'm going to use net price of, let's say, 100 USD. So the total value is becoming 1210, 1,210. Okay, so the net price is only, okay, this particular product material has net price of $12, so I'm gonna increase this to 1,000 or 100. So now it will become $1,200 total price, so we can look at that. Now you can see the total value here in the conditions. The total value of the PO is $1,240. Let's just see whether no, he's allowed to create such a PO or not. So I'm gonna try to save here. So it says, do you want to put the document on hold because there are some, there is some faulty data in here. Let's look at the faulty data here. So you can see from the log here, it says total PO value is beyond the band level limit. So basically, this particular message is coming from NextLabs policy, where the policy is evaluating whether user is allowed to create such a PO or not, based on his band. So he will not be able to save this particular PO. He can put it on hold and then come back, correct it, and save it again. But until this particular restriction is addressed, he will not be allowed to completely save the PO. So just to demonstrate, maybe let's try to change the PO quantity. Let's reduce it by, let's make it 50. So now you can see the total PO value is 620. So now let's see if he's allowed to save this particular PO. As you can see, the PO is successfully saved with the number 591. We can take a quick look at just to confirm. Yeah, the 591, the total value is $620, quantity 50, and net price $12.40. So in this way, this particular user belonging to B1, he's denied to create anything beyond $1,000. At the same time, he's allowed to create if any PO is less than $1,000. Let's look at the similar scenario for a different band user. I'm going to log in with demo user 11 who has a band level B2. Now let's try to create PO again with this user. Let's use we can use the same vendor to demonstrate this. So now we can see the total value. So I've given 2,000 quantity. The total value is 24,800. Right. He belongs to band level B2. So let's see whether he will be allowed to create such a PO with 24,000 total USD. Again, it says that document still faulty. So there are messages. So if you go and see the messages, you can see that the total PO value is beyond the band level limit. So he has a band level of B2, which is allowed to see 10,000. Is allowed to create a PO of $10,000. Now, since it's more than 10,000, he's getting this message. Now let's try to change the PO quantity to, see if he is allowed to create anything. It's still 12,400. So I think it is still above his limit. So I'm going to reduce the quantity by a little more. So maybe I'll give 800 units. Now the total value of the PO is 9,920. So let's try to see if we can create a PO for such scenario. As you can see, he is able to successfully save the PO. So in this example, you can control who can create a PO with what values. That type of controls can be implemented using NextLabs policies, and the policies can be very generic. You can have a different combination of criteria to define your business rules or policies. At the same time, the band levels or any criteria like signature authority or delegation authorities could be assigned to users. And the assignment of such attributes to user, there are multiple ways to do it. You could derive them based on your HR data, or you could also use if you have any other non-SAP HR system. So those attributes can be enrolled into NextLabs platform, and those attributes can be used in the decision making. If those attributes can be derived within SAP, so we have multiple options there. So if the logic is very complicated to derive the bands or the limits, you could write an ABAP logic in a BADI. So there is a BADI given part of the product that you can use to write a complex logic to derive such attributes like band level or signature authorities, and that information is sent to NextLab policy evaluation, and then the decision comes back to SAP, where system will decide whether he's allowed to create a PO or not. In this example, we will see one of the internal control requirement, what we call a segregation of duty. Segregation of duties is a key principle in internal control for any business process. What it basically means that in a given business process, a single person should not be doing all the key functions within the process. For example, let's say if you take a PO, PO as a process, business process, so you cannot have same person creating a PO and also posting a GR. So this type of controls are mainly required or put in place to make sure there is no fraud or error. And these are very critical from an internal controls point of view for different business processes in the system. So in this example, we will look at this specific scenario of PO and the GR. So to demonstrate this, I have taken two users. We have demo user 1 and demo user 2. So there are two different POs, one created by user 1 and another one created by user 2. And now we will do the GR. So at the time of GR, system should validate if there is any SOD risk. And the rule is you cannot have the same person creating a PO or changing a PO and also doing the GR. So if it is the same person, the system should actually warn him about the SOD risk that he's in the process, and then if he understands the risk and he's agreed to go ahead, he's allowed to create the GR. But he does not agree to the risk, then he will be stopped to continue to post the GR. Whereas if he tries to create a GR for a PO which is not created by him or changed by him, then it should be allowed. So there is no SOD risk there. So the system should allow him to go ahead and post the GR. Let's look at this in the system. So I already logged into demo user 1. Let's try to create a GR for one of the PO. I've taken PO 369. So this particular PO is created by demo user 1. So let me quickly show you that. So this is a purchase order report. I'm gonna display a list of purchasing documents created by demo user 1 for this particular vendor. As you can see, 369 is created by demo user 1, right? So now let's say when he tries to post the GR for this, so let's take the posting date here, and then I'm gonna confirm this particular line, saying that this particular line is the goods has been received. So as you can see here, so there is a pop-up with SOD compliance. So this particular pop-up is actually coming from policy. So the NextLab policy that is evaluating the SOD risk in this particular business process. He is actually showing this particular pop-up, and it says that access is subject to SOD risk. Do you acknowledge the risk and wish to continue? So it actually warns the user about the risk, and then the user can decide whether he wants to continue or not. If he chooses to continue, yes, he will be allowed to go ahead and post GR. But if he chooses to not to continue, then he will be completely stopped. So let's take a scenario. Let's try to say no here. Then action is cancelled, and then user is completely taken out of the Migo transaction. So basically the particular transaction that he's trying to post is not committed. So the transaction is completely cancelled, and it goes out of the particular document as well. Let's try to maybe let's also look at what happens if you try to click S in this particular scenario. Let's try to do the same thing again. I'm going to create a Migo for the same document. I'm just giving a posting date where my period is open, and then I'm going to confirm my line item with the goods. Let's try to post. So again, you have this SOD risk pop-up from the policy. So now I'm saying S to this. So I know the risk. I want to go ahead. So you can see that the GR has been posted with document 585. So in this way, if a user understands the risk, he is allowed to post the GR. So now let's take an example where demo user 1 is trying to post a GR for a PO that is created by somebody else. So let's pick a PO. Let me run that report again. I just want to look at the POs that are created by demo user 2. And for the same vendor. Yeah, so we have purchase order 370 that's created by demo user 2. So let's try to do a Migo again. So I'm gonna do it from the beginning again here. So I went into Migo, I choose purchase order. I'm gonna key in my purchase order here. So this purchase order is not created by me. So I should be allowed to create this particular GR. So I'll complete my item and then let's post. Okay, so there is a posting period issue that we can quickly correct. So let me change the posting date. Okay, and then let me post it again. Okay, so as you can see, document is successfully posted. So in this particular scenario, there is no SOD risk associated with the process because the person who's doing GR is different from the person who created or changed the PO. That's why you didn't see any SOD pop up here. But whereas in the previous scenario where the same person is doing both the key functions, then SOD risk has been shown. So just to look at how this is done in the system, so let me quickly show you the corresponding policy for this. So we have SOD check for PO and GR. So we can have similar SOD checks for multiple different scenarios in different functions like finance, manufacturing, purchasing, sales. In a different function, we could have different SOD checks, and you can define which are the transactions that you want to evaluate the SOD check. So here you mentioned Migo, and then you're saying the SOD check if it is enabled, then and the pop-up, the GRC mitigation pop-up, it's actually defined. So you can so we have control and configuration to define what should be the mechanism to inform the user, whether it is a simple SAP message like you display at the bottom of the bar, or it could be a pop-up that shows up in a separate window. So here we have chosen GRC mitigation pop-up, and that's why it shows that particular pop-up in the scenario. So in this way, NextLab product can be used to implement a lot of internal controls or GRC compliance related information very easily. And the policies, as I said, it's very generic in the sense you can apply the same policy for multiple different use cases. You don't have to create one by each policy for each scenario. You can generalize them and put into a single policy. And also it's very easy to manage the policies with audit log with the policy definitions itself. If anybody changed the policies, you can see the log, and also all the transaction log, whether the SOD check, whether it is true or false, whether it is SOD related or not, all those audit is also stored in here. And there are a lot of reports which could help the internal audit team to demonstrate or prove that there was no SOD violations in a given particular business process or in a given time period. So all those functionalities are readily available out of the box, and then they are well received by many customers, especially the auditing part. In this use case, we'll look at an example of how to mask specific fields in SAP using a condition on a user, meaning the masking should be applied only to subset of the users, not for everyone, but only to a subset of the users. To demonstrate this example, I took an example of bank details in SAP. The bank details are stored in a transaction called BP, business partner transaction in SAP, especially the bank account number, bank key, and the account name. So these are very sensitive information. At the database level, these three fields are stored in a table called BUT0BK. In this scenario, we will look at two users. One user, demo user 5, who belongs to finance department, and demo user 6 belonging to purchasing department. Only the finance department can see the bank details, whereas if anybody else is accessing the data, they should see the masked value. That's the overview of the scenario. Let's look at how this is done using DAE from NextLabs. Let's take a quick look at the policy for this particular scenario. As you can see, the policy has multiple components in it. One key component, what we call, is the subject condition, where you can write a specific condition for the user, whoever is accessing the data. So here the condition we have is a department _ SAP not equal to finance. So if the user department does not belongs to finance, then this policy is relevant. And also the resource component, resource would basically mean which system you're going to apply this to. Like you could have multiple SAP systems in the landscape. So if you want this policy to be applied to a specific system, you can mention that specific resource name here. So in this example, I mentioned H49. That's the name of the SAP system I'm going to use for the demo today. And then the real policy, the masking policy information is mentioned in the obligation, where you can mention the table name, field, and the type of masking. So for example, here the masking table is BUT0BK, and the fields, here you can list your set of fields, and then you can define what type of masking you are applying, whether it is a full mask or you want to do a partial mask. So you can also do a partial mask, meaning you can only mask, you can leave maybe the last 4 positions intact, mask the remaining else, like that. So in this example, I'm going to show full masking. So and the mask value, the mask symbol. So here I mentioned as ****. So basically **** would be used as the mask value when it's used in the system. So this is the policy, and we can see how this takes effect in the SAP system. I already logged into the system here, user. There are multiple ways you can assign a department to the user. In this example, we use the user master record from SAP SE01 transaction. So let's take a quick look at what department they belong to. Demo user 5. You can see the department is finance. Let's also check for demo user 6. Demo user 6 is purchasing. So the requirement is that if the data being accessed by a non-finance user, then the data should be masked. So let's start with demo user 6, who belongs to purchasing department. Demo user 6. Let's look at the table data first, and then we'll go and see the transaction. So to look at the table data, we could use SE16 transaction, and then BUT0BK is the underlying table for that particular data. So you can execute wide open and see. So as you can see here, the 3 fields: bank key, bank account number, and the account name. All the 3 fields are shown with star, which is a masked value coming from the policy. Right. So you can see that it's applied across the board, meaning it is applicable to all the business partners without any restriction. Let's also confirm this from a from the transaction level. So I'm going to access it using BP. The T code is BP, and you can key in the specific. You can pick any BP. I just picked this one, and let's see. So here you can display the basic data of the business partner, including name and address. So the bank information is stored in the payment transactions tab. You can see here the bank key, bank account number, and the account name. All the 3 fields are shown with ***. And this is because demo user 6 is not a finance user. That's why he's seeing the mask value. Let's try to see the same data for a finance user who is demo user 5. So let's try to display the table again. I'm going to run wide open. As you can see here, you could clearly see that bank key, bank account number, and the account name. I think account name is not filled for many of the records, but you can see that finance user can see the data that's specific. So let's take we could take the same BP that we used. So this is the BP where non-finance user was seeing a masked value. So let's try to open same BP with the finance user. We can go to the payment transactions tab, and you can see here, so the bank key and the bank account number, so both are visible to the finance user. So this way, using a simple policy defined at the table and field level, the masking can be made in across the system, irrespective of whether it is a table or a T code or even a report or even a Fury app. Irrespective of how you access the data, the masking is applied just by using one policy defined at a table level. So this concludes this particular use case. Yeah, I think that's it. Right, Charles?
Yeah, thank you, Krishna. I would just like to thank you for joining KPMG and NextLabs today for our presentation of automating IT business processes and security controls. Again, today's webinar has been recorded. Recording will be available after for all participants. And thank you again for joining us. Goodbye.
Thank you.